as Michael noted, I'm a historian, and I'm a historian of what I like to call the Atlantic world. And in case you're not familiar with that concept, it's a very helpful analytical tool which has been one of the defining trends in early modern history over the last 20-odd years. And Atlantic historians approach the early modern world in an attempt to move past the nation state and inevitable outcomes and attempt to integrate the histories of Africa, Europe, and the Americas into a more seamless whole, which we'd argue reflects the reality of life in the 16th through 19th centuries. My first book was actually what I call a micro-comparative history of North America's largest maroon community. And a maroon community is a settlement of escaped slaves. The one I looked at emerged in Spanish West Florida in the early 19th century and numbered well into the hundreds. I sought to recreate life here and then in turn compared the results with marronage from across the hemisphere, a phenomenon very common in places like Jamaica, Suriname, and Brazil. And what I argued is that you have, at Prospect Bluff, Spanish Florida, a unique opportunity to view slave consciousness, ideas about resistance, and situate early North American history in a comparative framework. My current project, which I'm working on at SAR, grows out of these interests, but on an epically large scale, and certainly in comparison. And what I'm doing began as a 300-year history of Afro-Indian interrelations in the British Atlantic world. And this 300 years would be from the middle of the 16th century all the way to the middle of the 19th century, bless you. And when I say Afro-Indian interrelations, I mean interactions between people of African ancestry and indigenous people along the Atlantic coast of North America into the Caribbean, Central America, and the northeastern corner of South America. Over the course of the last year, as I've begun to organize my research material, which I collected year before last in London, the geographic thrust of my projects changed a little bit. And it's focused as much in the Caribbean as anywhere else. And this has happened for a couple of reasons. One, when I started to go through 50,000 odd digital images I collected over a year in England, I came to realize that, wow, this area really puts all of my ideas to the test. By this, I mean, it became clear after examining a ton of material that the early modern Caribbean was a place, continued to be an indigenous space. And by an indigenous space, I mean a place where Native Americans, some brought in from North America, some from Mexico, some from Central America, some indigenous to the Caribbean, exerted tremendous geopolitical influence, impacted the cultures and diplomatic machinations of this world, affected laws, understandings of race and identity. So what's emerged over the course of the last year are essentially two intertwined projects which get at the same questions. One, this fundamental jumping off point of Afro-Indian interactions in this broader Atlantic world, but tied to it, what is something I've been calling essentially a native history of the British West Indies during the age of slavery and empire. Both of these undertakings, I feel, are hugely lacking and will fundamentally alter our understanding of this broad English Atlantic world and confound ideas about how we see race, colonialism, empire, these different societies. And ultimately, my goal is to force people to understand that this larger Atlantic world and this kind of large subdivision of the Caribbean, which is at the heart of it, was a tri-racial society. And understanding this world in racial binaries, black and white, native and white, which the historiography and much of the anthropological literature has done, fails to understand how these societies functioned. What I'm doing here specifically at SAR is writing. I, like I noted before, was very lucky and got to spend a year in England, the year before last. I've collected a voluminous amount of archival material, gotten through the anthropological and archaeological literature, and every morning after dropping my daughter off, I head over to my office and write. And a project like this would be not impossible, but very hard without opportunities to get into the archives on an extended period, and then to immerse yourself in such an extraordinary environment with, again, an uninterrupted opportunity to write and work. So thank you very much.